She walked into the dealership wearing jeans and a simple white t-shirt, inquiring about a luxury car. The salesman looked her up and down with disdain. "I'm sorry, but I think you're in the wrong place," he sneered, gesturing toward the exit. "These vehicles start at $300,000. As other staff members snickered and customers stared, her face flushed with humiliation. She left without a word. The next morning, a gleaming Rolls-Royce Phantom pulled up outside the dealership. When the back door opened, the salesman's jaw dropped. He never saw it coming. The prestigious Boston luxury motors sparkled under the morning light. Glass walls showcased a fleet of exotic vehicles that most people would only dream of owning. Porsche, Bentley, Aston Martin, Ferrari, each more expensive than the last. Margaret Collins, Maggie, to those who knew her, stepped through the doors, her brown ponytail bouncing slightly with each step. Her simple white t-shirt, well-worn jeans and minimal makeup reflected a woman who valued practicality over presentation. At 35, she exuded a quiet confidence that came from knowing exactly who she was. What wasn't apparent from her modest appearance was that Maggie was the founder and driving force behind the Collins Foundation for Children with Disabilities, an organization that had transformed thousands of young lives. Years before meeting her now husband, she had built the foundation from nothing, pouring her heart and education in special needs development into creating real change. As she entered the showroom, her eyes immediately fell on a sleek, midnight blue coupe, perfect for her sister's 40th birthday. Carolyn had always dreamed of owning a luxury car, and after beating breast cancer last year, Maggie wanted to give her something truly special. She could easily afford it. Her foundation's success and personal investments had made her comfortable in her own right, though few knew that. Across the showroom, Blake Thompson adjusted his blue tie and straightened his navy suit jacket. As sales manager, he prided himself on being able to spot serious buyers instantly. At the sight of Maggie and her casual clothes, he smirked and nodded to his colleagues. This would be amusing. "Good morning," Maggie smiled at a young salesman named Daniel, who approached her. "Welcome to Boston Luxury Motors. I'm Daniel. Is there something specific you're interested in today?" Before Maggie could respond, Blake smoothly intercepted. "I'll handle this, Daniel," he said, then turned to Maggie with a practiced smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Looking for directions, Mum?" And just like that, Maggie's day at the dealership began, a day that would change perspectives for everyone involved. "Actually," Maggie replied pleasantly, "I'm interested in that midnight blue coupe." She pointed to the $285,000 vehicle displayed on the elevated platform. Blake Thompson's smile tightened. He'd seen this before, people wandering in to daydream about cars they could never afford. With end-of-month quotas looming and 3 serious buyers expected that afternoon, he had no time for fantasies. "That's the limited edition Azure. Only 15 were made this year," he said, emphasizing each word as if speaking to a child. "Perhaps I could direct you to our used car division. They're in a separate building about 3 blocks east." Maggie noticed how his eyes darted over her simple clothing, lingering on her scuffed sneakers. She was accustomed to such judgments. Most people had no idea she deliberately chose this way of living, finding freedom and simplicity despite having access to immense wealth. "I'd really like to learn more about this one," she persisted politely. "Is it possible to see the interior?" Blake's expression soured. Behind him, 2 salesmen exchanged knowing glances. "The Azure is by appointment only," he lied smoothly. "Our serious clients typically schedule private viewings." Just then, a couple dressed in designer clothing entered. Blake's demeanor transformed instantly. "Please excuse me," he said to Maggie without actually looking at her. "Why don't you take a brochure? Daniel can help you with that." He strode toward the couple, arms outstretched. "Welcome, Mr. and Mrs. Harrington. Wonderful to see you again." Daniel, the younger salesman, approached Maggie with an apologetic smile. He couldn't be more than 25, and his suit seemed a size too large. "I'm sorry about that," he said quietly. "Would you like me to tell you about the Azure?" "I would, thank you," Maggie replied. As Daniel enthusiastically described the vehicle's features, Maggie noticed Blake leading the well-dressed couple directly to the Azure. He opened the door with a flourish, inviting Mrs. Harrington to sit inside the same car he'd claimed was appointment only. "That's quite all right," Maggie assured the now uncomfortable Daniel. "I understand how these things work." Across the showroom, Blake was performing his well-rehearsed sales routine. "This particular model has a waiting list of 8 months, but I've set aside one for special clients." Mrs. Harrington ran her hand along the leather interior. "It's exquisite, but I'm not sure about the color." "We could certainly discuss custom options," Blake assured her. Maggie approached quietly, standing just within earshot. "Excuse me," she said. "I was hoping to inquire about purchasing this model." Blake's face reddened. "As I mentioned earlier, this vehicle is being shown to these customers," he said, with barely contained irritation. "Perhaps you could come back another time. Or, as I suggested, check our used car options." The couple looked uncomfortably between Blake and Maggie. "I'm specifically interested in this car," Maggie stated calmly, "for my sister's birthday next month." Blake stepped away from the Harringtons, lowering his voice. "Look, I understand people like to dream, but this is a place of business. That vehicle will cost more than most homes. Now, I've been patient, but you're interrupting a legitimate sale." Several nearby customers had stopped to watch the uncomfortable exchange. Daniel hovered anxiously at the periphery. "I'm prepared to make a cash purchase today," Maggie said, maintaining her composure. That was when Blake's professional veneer completely cracked. He laughed, a short, harsh sound that echoed across the showroom floor. Several heads turned. "A cash purchase, really?" His voice was louder now, designed to humiliate. "This isn't a yard sale. We're talking about $250,000. People who can afford these cars don't dress like—" He gestured dismissively at her outfit. Maggie felt her cheeks flush, not from embarrassment, but from a slow, building anger, not for herself. She'd experienced such treatment before, but for anyone who had ever been judged by their appearance. "I believe my money is as good as anyone else's," she said quietly. Blake stepped closer, towering over her. "Let me be clear," he said, no longer bothering to hide his disdain. "You are wasting my time and embarrassing yourself. Either make an appointment for a serious discussion, dressed appropriately, or please leave the premises." The showroom had gone silent. The Harringtons had stepped away from the car, visibly uncomfortable. "Is there a problem here?" A newer voice joined the conversation. It was the dealership's owner, Richard Mason, attracted by the commotion. Blake straightened his tie. "No problem, sir. Just explaining to this lady that we operate by appointment for serious buyers." Richard Mason assessed the situation quickly, taking in Maggie's simple appearance and the watching crowd. His expression made it clear which side he was taking. "I see," he said. "Ms. Collins?" Maggie supplied. "Margaret Collins." "Miss Collins, perhaps there's been a misunderstanding. Our clientele typically, well, they understand the exclusivity of our vehicles." "I understand perfectly," Maggie replied, her voice steady, despite the humiliation burning in her chest. "Your sales manager has made your policies quite clear." Blake stepped forward again, his voice dripping with condescension. "If you're genuinely interested, which I doubt, you can call for an appointment. But I'd suggest bringing proof of funds and dressing the part. These cars," he gestured around the showroom, "are for a certain class of people." A murmur rippled through the onlookers. Someone snickered. Maggie looked around at the judging faces, at Blake's smug expression, at the owner's tacit approval of his employees' behavior. She'd faced discrimination before, but rarely so blatantly, so publicly. "I see," she said simply, with dignity intact, but spirits bruised. She turned and walked toward the exit. Behind her, she heard Blake's voice, not quite quiet enough. "Some people just don't know their place." As she pushed through the glass doors into the morning sunlight, Maggie pulled out her phone. The humiliation stung, but a small, resolute smile formed on her lips as she dialed. Beyond the Collins estate sat on 5 quiet acres outside Boston, its understated elegance revealing nothing of the billions behind its ownership. Alexander Collins preferred it that way. At 41, the tech visionary had revolutionized renewable energy storage technology, building a fortune while maintaining a deliberately low profile. When Maggie entered his home office, Alexander looked up from his desk, immediately setting aside his work. 15 years of marriage had taught him to read her expressions with precision. "Something was wrong. What happened?" he asked, moving around the desk to meet her. Maggie sank into a leather chair, the morning's events washing over her anew. "It was educational," she said, with a wry smile that didn't reach her eyes. She recounted the experience at the dealership, the condescension, the humiliation, the blatant discrimination. As she spoke, Alexander's expression darkened, but he remained silent, giving her the space to process. "It's not about me," she concluded. "I have the privilege of walking away knowing the truth, but how many people get treated that way every day without the comfort of knowing they actually could afford what they're being denied?" Alexander nodded thoughtfully. In their years together, this was what had always moved him most about Maggie, her consistent concern for others, even when she herself had been wronged. "So, what would you like to do about it?" he asked finally. "Part of me wants to do nothing," she admitted, "just buy Caroline's gift elsewhere. But then I think about that young salesman, Daniel, who treated me with respect, regardless of how I was dressed, and I think about all the people who face that kind of judgment without having any recourse." She looked directly at Alexander. "These people need to understand that worth isn't determined by appearance, but I don't want vengeance. I want awareness." Alexander nodded slowly, a plan forming. "I think I might have an idea that accomplishes both." "Nothing too dramatic," Maggie warned, knowing her husband's protective instincts. "No buying the dealership and firing everyone." Alexander laughed. "Nothing so cliché, but maybe." He leaned forward, eyes twinkling. "A little education is in order." Together they crafted a plan, not for revenge, but for enlightenment, something that might change perspectives more effectively than simple retribution. "Are you sure you don't want to come along?" Alexander asked, when they'd finalized the details. Maggie shook her head. "This isn't about me needing to witness their comeuppance. It's about them learning to see beyond appearances." She paused, then added with a smile, "But I expect a full report." As evening settled over their home, Alexander made several phone calls, setting things in motion for the following morning. Tomorrow would bring a powerful lesson in humility and the danger of assumptions, not just for Blake Thompson, but for everyone at Boston Luxury Motors. If you're enjoying this story, hit that subscribe button and join our community of story lovers. Now, let's get back to see what happens next. The following morning arrived with picture-perfect weather. Blake Thompson entered Boston Luxury Motors with a confident stride, straightening his signature blue tie. Yesterday's incident with the underdressed woman had become an amusing anecdote he'd shared over drinks with colleagues. Another delusional dreamer thinking she belonged in the world of luxury. The showroom gleamed under carefully positioned lights, exotic cars arranged strategically to maximize their allure. Blake had just finished the morning staff meeting, emphasizing the importance of qualifying customers properly. "Remember," he'd instructed the sales team, "our time is valuable. We cater to a specific clientele. It's not elitism, it's efficiency." Daniel, the young salesman, had remained quiet during the meeting, his discomfort evident. Blake made a mental note to have a word with him about proper customer assessment. At precisely 10:17 a.m., the distinctive purr of an exceptional engine drew attention outside. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, a vehicle unlike any other glided to a stop directly in front of the main entrance. Conversations halted mid-sentence. Even Blake, typically unimpressed by luxury vehicles given his daily proximity to them, felt his pulse quicken. A Rolls-Royce Phantom extended wheelbase, but not just any Phantom. This was a custom model with a unique midnight blue finish that seemed to shift colors in the sunlight. Conservative estimates would place its value north of $1.2 million. "Is that—" Richard Mason, the owner, had emerged from his office, drawn by the sudden silence. "The bespoke Phantom," Blake confirmed, already moving toward the entrance. "Extremely rare configuration." A uniformed chauffeur exited the Rolls-Royce and walked around to open the rear passenger door with white-gloved precision. From the vehicle emerged a man of commanding presence, tall, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit that whispered rather than shouted its five-figure price tag. His salt and pepper hair was perfectly groomed, his posture effortlessly authoritative. Blake's salesman instincts kicked into overdrive. This was beyond a good prospect. This was the kind of client dealerships competed for, the kind whose purchases included not just one vehicle, but potentially an ongoing relationship worth millions. "Good morning, sir. Welcome to Boston Luxury Motors," Blake called out, intercepting the distinguished visitor before any other salesperson could approach. "Blake Thompson, sales manager. It's an absolute pleasure to have you with us today." The man regarded Blake with an unreadable expression, then offered a polite smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Alexander Collins," he replied simply, offering a firm handshake. Blake's mind raced. The name sounded vaguely familiar, but he couldn't immediately place it. Regardless, the Rolls-Royce spoke volumes about the man's financial status. "Mr. Collins, it's truly an honor. What brings you to our humble establishment today? Perhaps I could show you our newest arrivals. We just received a limited edition." Alexander raised a hand slightly, halting Blake's practiced pitch. "Actually, I'm here about a specific vehicle, the Azure Coupe, midnight blue." Blake's smile broadened. "Excellent choice, sir. One of only 15 produced this year. I'd be delighted to show you. It's actually right over—" "I know where it is," Alexander interrupted smoothly. "My wife was here yesterday, expressing interest in it." Blake's customer service smile remained fixed, though confusion flickered in his eyes. "Your wife?" "I don't recall. Perhaps one of my colleagues assisted her." Alexander's expression cooled noticeably. "No, Mr. Thompson, you assisted her, or rather you refused to assist her. Margaret Collins. She was wearing jeans and a white t-shirt. You suggested she might be more comfortable looking at used cars." The blood drained from Blake's face as realization dawned. Behind him he heard a small gasp from Daniel, who had been hovering nearby. "Mr. Collins, Blake stammered, his usual smooth delivery abandoning him. "There must be some misunderstanding. We welcome all customers here." By now, Richard Mason had approached, sensing a situation developing. "Is everything all right, Blake?" Alexander turned his attention to the owner. Mr. Mason, I presume? Richard Mason, yes indeed. Welcome to Boston Luxury Motors. Thank you. I was just explaining to Mr. Thompson that my wife visited yesterday, interested in purchasing the Azure Coupe as a gift for her sister. She was, however, treated in a manner that I find troubling. Richard's expression shifted rapidly from welcoming to concerned. I'm sorry to hear that. I believe I was briefly involved in a conversation, but I wasn't aware of all the details. Alexander nodded thoughtfully. The details include your sales manager here suggesting that people like her don't belong in an establishment like this, based solely on her casual attire. By now, a small crowd had gathered, other salespeople, support staff, and even a few early customers. The showroom had gone completely silent. Mr. Collins, Blake began, desperation creeping into his voice. If there was any misunderstanding, it wasn't a misunderstanding. Daniel suddenly spoke up. All eyes turned to the young salesman, who looked surprised at his own courage. Miss Collins was treated poorly. She was polite and specific about her interest in the Azure, and she was dismissed repeatedly based on her appearance. Blake shot Daniel a withering look, but the damage was done. Alexander turned back to Richard Mason. You know, it's interesting. My wife founded and runs the Collins Foundation for Children with Disabilities. It's been her life's work since before I met her. She's raised over $50 million for specialized medical equipment and educational programs. He paused, letting this sink in. Maggie chooses to dress simply because she believes in living modestly, despite our means. She finds it keeps her connected to the families she helps. It's one of the countless reasons I love her. Richard Mason had gone pale. Mr. Collins, I assure you, this does not reflect the values of our dealership. We pride ourselves on... Actions speak louder than mission statements, Mr. Mason, Alexander interrupted firmly. Now, regarding the Azure, I'm not here to purchase just one vehicle. Blake perked up slightly at this, a glimmer of professional hope breaking through his distress. I was planning to purchase the Azure for my wife's sister, as Maggie intended, but I was also considering a fleet replacement for our corporate vehicles, 7 in total, and my personal collection could use updating as well. Mason's eyes widened. A sale of that magnitude would make their quarterly targets in a single transaction. However, Alexander continued, I find myself questioning whether this is the right establishment for such a significant investment. The silence in the showroom was absolute. Blake looked physically ill. Mr. Collins, Richard began desperately, I cannot apologize enough for this unfortunate incident. I assure you, this is not how we conduct business. Please allow us to make this right. Alexander considered this for a moment. Perhaps there is a way forward, he said finally. But it would require more than just selling me cars. Anything, Richard assured him quickly. The Collins Foundation is hosting a benefit gala next month. We're raising funds for a new adaptive sports complex for children with physical disabilities. He turned to the mortified sales manager. Blake, I think your presence would be educational. Blake swallowed hard. Sir? Not as a guest, Alexander clarified. As a volunteer. The foundation is always looking for people to help with setup, to assist the children, to see firsthand the work being done. The implications were clear. This wasn't just about selling cars anymore. It was about learning a fundamental lesson in human value. Additionally, Alexander continued, addressing Richard Mason, the dealership might consider implementing a training program on unconscious bias. I know several excellent consultants. Richard nodded emphatically. Absolutely. We would welcome such an initiative. As for the vehicles, Alexander turned to Daniel, the young salesman who had spoken up. "I'd like you to handle all the paperwork, starting with the Azure for my sister-in-law." Daniel's eyes widened. "Me? Thank you, sir. I'd be honored." "Good," Alexander said with finality. "Now shall we discuss the specifics of the corporate fleet?" As they moved toward Mason's office, Alexander paused in front of the Azure, running his hand along its sleek contour. "My wife has excellent taste, doesn't she?" Behind them, Blake Thompson stood motionless, his perfect world fundamentally altered. The harsh truth had finally dawned on him. He had revealed his character, not by how he treated those he thought important, but by how he treated those he believed were not. 1 month later, the Collins Foundation benefit gala transformed the Grand Boston Hotel into a celebration of possibility. Children with various disabilities and their families mingled with donors, medical professionals, and supporters. Near the entrance, Blake Thompson, dressed not in his usual attire but in the event staff uniform, directed guests and assisted a young boy in a wheelchair. The past month had changed him profoundly. His volunteer work at the foundation had started as an obligation, the price of professional survival, but something unexpected had happened. As he witnessed the challenges these children faced daily and the dignity with which they met them, he began to change. Across the room, Maggie Collins, elegant in a simple blue dress, approached him. Despite knowing who she was now, Blake was struck again by her lack of pretension. "How are you finding the experience, Blake?" she asked. He considered the question seriously. "Humbling," he finally answered, "and necessary." Maggie nodded. "Thomas seems to have taken a liking to you," she observed, referring to the boy in the wheelchair. "He's teaching me about adaptive basketball," Blake admitted. "Apparently I have terrible form." This drew a genuine laugh from Maggie. "He's an honest coach." Blake's expression grew serious. "Mrs. Collins, I know I've apologized formally, but I need to say it directly. I'm truly sorry for how I treated you. There's no excuse." "You're right, there isn't," she agreed, but without malice. "The question is, what have you learned?" "That worth isn't determined by appearance, position, or possessions," he said thoughtfully. "And that everyone deserves respect until they prove otherwise, not the other way around." "Good lessons," Maggie acknowledged. "Expensive ones too, I imagine." Blake nodded ruefully, thinking of the substantial business the dealership had lost when Alexander Collins decided to purchase only the Azure and not the additional fleet. "Worth every penny," he replied sincerely. Across the room, Alexander joined them, placing a gentle hand on his wife's shoulder. "Blake was just sharing some of his insights," Maggie explained. Alexander nodded. "I hear you've become quite involved with the adaptive sports program." "Yes, sir. In fact, I've signed up to continue volunteering after my required period." He hesitated, then added, "And I've been working with Mr. Mason on revamping our customer approach at the dealership. No more qualifying by appearance." "I'm glad to hear it," Alexander said, then surprised Blake by adding, "Which reminds me that corporate fleet I mentioned, we're still in the market. Perhaps you could handle that transaction. Daniel speaks highly of how you've been mentoring him." Blake's expression registered shock before settling into genuine gratitude. "I would be honored, Mr. Collins, truly honored." Later that evening, as the event wound down, Blake watched Maggie and Alexander Collins working the room, not flaunting their wealth or influence, but connecting genuinely with each child and family. He reflected on how completely his perception had been transformed. A month ago, he would have dismissed someone like Maggie Collins based on her casual appearance. Now he understood that true value ran deeper than designer labels, luxury cars, or executive titles. As Blake helped Thomas back into his wheelchair after a photo session, the boy grinned up at him. "You know what, Mr. Blake? You're pretty cool for a grown-up." Blake smiled. "Coming from you, Thomas, that's the highest compliment I've received in a very long time." And he meant it. We all make judgments based on appearances, don't we? But as Blake Thompson discovered, looking beyond the surface can reveal extraordinary people and life-changing opportunities. If this story resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button and join our community of story lovers. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever misjudged someone based on their appearance, or been misjudged yourself? Your experiences might inspire others. And remember, the true measure of wealth has nothing to do with your bank account. It's about how you treat others when you think no one important is watching. See you in our next story, where another powerful lesson awaits.